Hi everyone, a warm welcome to this session on 5 essential things for scoring verbal 40 plus. I'm Piyush and I'm going to be your main host today. So before I get started, I would like to know if all of you can hear me loud and clear. I see there are about 28 people watching this webinar live. So please let me know in the chat if you can hear me loud and clear. And a very warm welcome to this session. This is going to be a really exciting session. For any one of you who is actually struggling to ace the verbal section, you are in the right place. And I'm really excited to share a lot from my experience. So just to start with my background, and I will request others who are there in the session to kind of introduce themselves and tell me about your current skill level in GMAT as well as verbal. That will be really great to see and hear from you. And do let me know if my audio is loud and clear. I think it should be loud and clear. But in the meantime, I'm going to introduce myself. So those of you who have not interacted with me earlier, I am someone who has about 9 years of experience helping students improve their GMAT scores and helping them apply to top B schools across the globe. And I've helped people get into INSEAD, Kellogg, Cornell, NYU Stern, Harvard, Wharton, you name a college, and I've helped people get into those colleges, both with respect to their GMAT preparation as well as their applications. But back when I was preparing for GMAT myself, I remember taking the very first verbal test and just scoring a 13 percentile in that test, even after putting in all the effort that I put in for my preparation. And it was really heartbreaking, trust me, like when you get to see that 13 percentile. And let me ask in this in the chat over here, how many of you have scored around like less than 30 percentile ever in any of the verbal tests that you have taken? I would like to hear from you, and don't be shy. I'm sharing honestly with where I started with. So I would like to see if any one of you is was in the same boat as I was. So I scored a 13 percentile in my very first GMAT verbal test, and I always used to feel that verbal is my Achilles heel. On the other hand, when I took the very first quant test after a bit of preparation, I was able to score quant 50 in the very first attempt. So it was that huge difference which I'm talking about over here. And I struggled big time with verbal. It did not like get like sorted for me in a short span of time. I took a lot of time to kind of improve my verbal skills, and I remember my scores always used to fluctuate between 25 to 70%. In some tests I'll end up doing really well. I will get around 70% accuracy. I'll be very happy that I'm scoring so well, and the other day I take another test and I end up scoring a 25 percentile or 30 percentile. And that's the kind of problem which I was facing. So do let me know if anyone of you who is here is facing that issue. I don't see any comment right now, so I'm assuming that none of you are that bad at verbal as I was. So please let me know if anyone of you had similar issues in verbal. And thankfully, when I corrected myself, I focused on my gaps. I was able to improve my verbal score to a verbal 41, which is a 93 percentile in my very first GMAT exam that I took. And I was able to get to a 740 because of that. I was able to score a quant 50 and a verbal 41. I was able to get to that 740 mark because of that. Now, this is about me. Now, why did I tell you about all this? Why this is important? This is important because I want you guys to understand that I'm not someone who is just a teacher, who has just come from a background where I was able to ace verbal just like that, just like naturally. It didn't happen to me. I struggled big time, so I can understand the problems that most people face, and that's why I'll be able to relate to a lot of issues that you guys have, and you will be able to relate to a lot of things that I'm going to tell you. So this is going to be a very different session, very insightful session in terms of exactly pinpointing you what your problem areas are and helping you understand how to work from it. And it's not just that I was able to score better myself. It is not just about you scoring good on GMAT. When you can actually help others also to score well on GMAT, it actually is the game changer then. And through my experience, through the sessions that I have conducted, I'm just telling you a story of one of our students, Rishabh, who was there in one of these sessions, a similar session about a year back from today. About a year back, he was attending one of our similar sessions, and he was struggling big time with verbal himself. Like he was a high performing individual in his work life, had a very hectic job. Even after that, he spent a lot of time preparing for GMAT. In fact, he used two courses back then, Mangush and GMAT, about 3-4 months he prepared for, and he was still having issues with verbal. He was stuck at a 670 on GMAT when he took the first attempt on it, and he was only able to score a verbal 34. Even after all the effort, even after all the long hours of work, he used to study, and he was struggling. And a similar session he was attending way back, and through the discussions that he actually benefited from, he was able to improve his score to a 740 with a verbal 41 in just 20 days, my friends. Just 20 days I'm talking about. And this fellow is actually selected at INSEAD as well as Kellogg. He's joining INSEAD. He just messaged me a couple of days back saying that he's paid the fees for INSEAD. So he's joining INSEAD cohort for September. So why I'm telling you all of this? I'm telling you all of this to help you understand, guys, it's not late. You still have hope. If you're still struggling with your verbal score, don't worry about it. You're going to learn a lot. I want you to be with an open mind today. I want you to understand the things that I'm telling you from an open mind, open perspective, and I'm pretty sure that you'll be able to actually overcome a lot of your problems. So stay tuned with me on this session. In case anyone of you wants to watch the Rishabh's story in details, like you want to get inspiration from him, you have this link handy with you. You can just bookmark it. I've just shared in the chat and check it out later on. So let's get started with this session without any further ado. So now, what are the 5 essential steps to score a verbal 40 plus? In my opinion, again, I'm talking about retakers over here or people who have done a little bit of preparation. So keeping that in mind, in my opinion, the first thing that you have to understand is why is that you are actually doing poorly on verbal. Identifying the core problem, in my opinion, is the biggest challenge that most people face. So we'll spend a lot of our time on that step, because unless you identify the core problem, you cannot really do well on the test. The second step of actually getting to a verbal 40 plus is to understand what is the solution to overcome the score plateau. I call it a score plateau because a lot of people get a flat line around the score of like for some people it is around 30, 35, some people it is around mid 20s, some people it is around low 20s, some people are stuck in the high 30s. So it doesn't matter where you are, but a lot of people get stuck in the score plateau. They don't know how to overcome that. So after discussing the problem or after understanding the problem, we'll get to the solution of the problem. And then we will get to the next part. Okay, now that we understand what is the solution, how do we master the solution and how do we get to that level that we are 100% confident about our skills? And then we have to understand how to time yourself to improve to like verbal 40 plus and how to ensure the consistency in your verbal scores, because that's another problem that a lot of people face, that they're not very consistent with the verbal scores. And then I'm going to also open it up for an open-ended Q&A. Not that you cannot ask me questions during the session. Please feel free to interrupt at any point of time when you have a question and ask a question. If I feel that the question is pertinent to the discussion at that moment, I'll pick it up right away. And I like picking up questions right away. So please interact with me, because that's the only way we can interact today. So please share your thoughts in the chat. So let's get started with identifying the core problem. Now, before I show you like the core problem or I talk about that, I would want to hear from you that what are the problems that you guys are facing with verbal. I see about 30 plus people live over here. I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to 60 seconds to share your thoughts in the chat. And I'm expecting at least 10 different comments from people, at least 10 or more. So please feel free to share your thoughts. What do you think are your core problems? And the good thing is, if I come across a problem which I have not taken care of in the presentation, then I can take it up additionally as a part of the session. Okay, so I have the first comment. Ashwin says, speed is the issue for me. Okay. What about others? Deepak says, I'm stuck at a verbal 35. Okay, so Deepak is saying I'm actually having the problem of the score plateau that you were talking about. Pranay says speed is the issue for me as well. Okay, so Ashwin and Pranay, 2 people are going for speed, timing. Okay. Chaitanya says accuracy. I am not able to score consistently. I guess that's what you mean, Chaitanya. Deepak also says timing. Shubhankar says assumption unable to reach accuracy despite a lot of practice. So he's practiced a lot, but he's not having a consistent accuracy. I believe, Shubhankar, you mean that? Okay, so Amber says RC inference. One line says something strong, then another is something else. So how do I connect things? How do I contextualize things? A very valid point, Amber. But Amber, do you face that in every RC passage, or do you face it in specific passages which are, let's say, from an unfamiliar genre, basically? Do let me know that. I'm stuck at a verbal 36 and my exam in 3 weeks is what Mansa says. The Mansa, again, you can take some inspiration from Rishabh. He was able to improve in 3 weeks and get a stellar score. Definitely, I'm going to help you with what are the things that you can do. So stay with me during the session. Okay, Amber says not in every passage. In some passages, I say it's stuck. So I think Amber is also facing an issue with related to unfamiliar things. Okay, I did much better in the mocks than I did on the day of the test, is what Ajay says. So Ajay, so sometimes Ajay is saying text day anxiety or that confidence is what he's lacking. Now, very common issues, guys. Very common issues. In fact, the next slide is actually about that. So in my opinion, what I see people, and I actually speak to about 6 to 7 people, new people every single day. And from my experience, what I see people doing is they tell me that in general, when my problem with verbal is that I'm not able to time myself right. My speed is not great. I'm not able to time myself right. I take too much time to solve the question. Many people say I'm low on confidence because of which I get a lot of anxiety issues during the test, as Ajay was saying, that I'm not very confident about my scores on the test. Many people struggle with hard questions. Some of you mentioned that today, but trust me, I cut across this question a lot of times. Many people come and tell me that my accuracy is not poor on easy and medium questions. My accuracy is actually poor on 700 level questions. A lot of you are talking about low accuracy, but probably some of you meant that your accuracy on hard questions is very low. Some people focus on telling me that my reading speed is very slow. A lot of you were saying that as well. I read slow. I read slow. What do I do that? Many people face this issue of unfamiliar genre, as Amber was pointing out, that if something is from unfamiliar genre, I am not able to relate to the inferences that are being pointed out over there. And a lot of people also have repetition errors. I think there was one person who was talking about CR inference and assumption. Yes, Aditi was saying that I actually struggle with CR inference and assumption. But what we need to understand, guys, is all these are basically symptoms of the main problem. They're not the main problem. Just take a parallel. Like, let's say you have typhoid. Okay, now typhoid is the root cause. The bacteria that cause typhoid is the root cause. But you will not be able to understand that it is typhoid. You will have symptoms like high fever, vomiting, nausea, and whatnot. Maybe stomach ache, whatever. Now, if you go to a doctor and the doctor does not give you any medication for typhoid, he rather gives you medication just for, let's say, stomach ache, high fever, and all those things, will that solve your problem? Let me know that. Yes, no, quick yes, no in the chat, guys. Do you think that will solve your problem if you are just getting medication for the symptoms and not the root cause? What do you think? Will that solve your problem, guys? Let's see a quick yes, no. Let's see if you're able to relate to that. Okay, Aditi says no, right? You will not be able to get a solution. Even if it solves the problem, that is basically gonna be a temporary solution. Amber, Mattu, both of you are saying the same. It's gonna be a temporary solution to your problem. You might feel better for a few days, but unless the root cause is treated, you will never be able to recover from the disease completely. And that's what you need to understand. GMAT is not something different. GMAT is a very logical test, and we have to approach it logically. The main problem that we face is that we focus so much so on the symptoms that we don't understand the root cause. And we are here today to understand the root cause. The root cause is none of these, none of the ones that are written on the screen. All of these are the symptoms or the outcomes of the root cause. So let's get going with the root cause. So what I'm going to do is, again, I'm going to show you the question later, but there's no better way to understand the root cause than to actually solve a question. So what I'm going to do today is something different. Like generally I give a official question for SC to solve, and then I show you how I solve it with option choices. But today what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a question of sentence correction to solve, but I'm not going to give you any options. And in fact, I would recommend many of you to even train yourself in that way. But for today's discussion, we are going to solve first a sentence correction question without any option choices. I want you to take your time and solve it, and I want you to let me know what you think are the errors and why do you think those are the errors. But don't put your comments, bro, don't put your answers in the comments when others are solving it. So please stay on mute, don't type anything in the comments unless I ask you to do so. So after you have spent about a minute and a half or 2 minutes on the question, I would verbally mention that you can now share your thoughts in the chat. Only then and only then please share your thoughts. Don't share your thoughts before that so that others are not biased by it. I hope that is fine. So I'm going to go on mute in about 30 seconds. So this is a sentence correction question. I have kept out the option choices intentionally. So focus on this question. You have about a minute, minute and a half, or maybe 2 minutes is max I will give you. And then I will ask you to put your errors in the comments. So you can start typing it, but don't press the enter button. Don't post it in the comments. All right, I'm gonna go on mute. You're gonna not hear anything from me for the next 1.5 to 2 minutes. All the best, guys. All right, I guess I have given close to 2 minutes to all of you. So now you can go ahead and start typing your whatever errors you think are there in the question stem in the chat comments. And please mention your rationale as well. Why do you think those are the errors? So please go ahead, start doing that, and we're going to start solving the question in a minute. So I know still some of you might be solving this question, but those of you who have done this, please share your errors in the chat. And I'm going to go on mute for the next 30 seconds. I guess you guys will take a little bit of time to write down your thoughts. Okay, I start seeing a lot of options. So let's see. Shubham says pronoun error, simple past tense used instead of present perfect, emphasized on. Deepak says since it's okay. Shubhankar says origin, wrong verb for emphasize from verb emphasized on. Pronoun error is what Prakhar says. Omaya says their pronoun agreement emphasized verb issue. Positioning of MEM pair oil industry may need to start. Okay. Okay, so I see a lot of comments in the chat. I'm so happy that many of you have actually identified a few errors. But let's focus on the more important thing, guys. So the reason why I've given you this question and I've not given you option choices is because I want you to understand the difference in the thought process that many people have. Now, when I was preparing for GMAT myself, the biggest problem that I faced was that initially when I prepared for verbal, and I'm going to talk about this at length as I move forward. I focused on sentence correction as grammar. So that was my thought process, that sentence correction is nothing but grammar. So obviously, like the thought process that I had was that, okay, I have to just tackle it from a grammatical perspective. So the moment I used to see a sentence correction question, my thought process was to read it as quickly as possible and look at it from a grammar perspective solely. In fact, this is one question which I give to a lot of students to solve. And whenever I give these questions to students, they kind of read the entire sentence in one go and then start looking at specific aspects of the sentence. They don't look at the holistic sentence, they look at specific aspects of the sentence, and then they end up missing out on something or the other. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to solve this question as if I'm solving it for the very first time. Okay, so I'm going to solve it as if I'm going to solve it from the very first time. And I want you guys to observe the method that I'm using and then share your thoughts in the comments about the difference that you see in my method versus your method. And understand it, guys, it is not important for you to get this particular question right. Okay, you can get this question right, but this question is not going to come on the GMAT. You can get a different question altogether. So the bigger objective over here when we are discussing is for you to develop the understanding of where you're going wrong with the way you're approaching verbal questions. And that's something which I want you to understand. Okay, a lot of monologue I've done, but I think that sets the context correctly. So let's get started with the question stem, and I'm going to read it for the first time as I'm doing it for the first time. Okay, so let's focus on that. Since their origins in the mid 19th century. Okay, so the moment I read this part, since their origins in the mid 19th century, I understand two things. First, that I'm talking about origins of something. Origins of something. I'm not sure what. Okay, so probably the sentence is going to tell me origins of what. Okay, and second thing that I know is something has been happening since then. Okay, so there's something which has been happening since then. Since when? Since the origins of that particular thing. I still don't know what. So till now I've read just a small part, and I've understood that I'm talking about origins of something. I don't know whose origins, and something has been happening since the origins of that, which happened in the mid 19th century. I don't know what has been happening. These are two things which I'm going to probably read further as I go further. And I wanted to focus on this contextualizing skill that I'm actually using. The oil industry developed an industrial structure. Okay, so the oil industry developed an industrial structure. This probably tells me that I was talking about the origins of the oil industry. Now, if I'm talking about the origins of the oil industry and I'm using the word there for oil industry, that is incorrect. Why is it incorrect? Because oil industry is singular. So I should be using since its origins in the mid 19th century. Okay, that's one error that I could identify. So that is one error, number one. The second thing which I can understand from the sentence is that the oil industry developed an industrial structure. So what has been happening since the origins? The development of an industrial structure has been happening. Okay, so this is the event that I was talking about. Now this event is being communicated using a simple past tense, which means that this is a one-point event which completed in the past. But since I'm using since with it, this communicates the thought that this event is continuing till now. This is a process which is still continuing. It has not ended. It might be continuing, or it is a fresh feeling which I'm using. So for this, I need a present perfect tense. I need has developed. So this is error number two that I can identify. So till now, what I understand from the sentence is, from the beginning of the oil industry, on the origins of the oil industry, it has focused on developing an industrial structure. Let's read further. That emphasized scale and scope. Now, what is that referring to? It's definitely referring to the structure. So that industrial structure emphasized scale and scope to maximize profits. And the goal for doing that is to maximize profits. So I get the crux of the sentence that it wants to tell me that from the very beginning itself, the oil industry's focus has been on maximizing profit. In order to achieve that, it has developed an industrial structure that focuses on scale and that emphasizes scale and scope. Simple. Let's read further. Which could have been huge. Now, what is which referring to? Let's try to make sense out of all the information. Which is very close to profit. So most likely it's referring to profit because that's what a relative pronoun does, which is a relative pronoun over here. Now, does it make sense in the context of the sentence? Let's see. To maximize profit. So I'm talking about maximizing profits. I'm talking about which could have been huge, maximizing, kind of makes sense. So most likely the author wants to communicate the thought that the profits could have been huge. But the moment I say profits could have been huge, what does this could have been communicate to me? This could have been communicates a hypothetical scenario. When I say could have been, it communicates a hypothetical scenario that this is something that did not happen. It could have happened, but it did not happen, right? For example, if I say that I could have scored a 760 on GMAT, that's an incomplete thought. Okay, if you say that I could have scored a 760 on GMAT, that's an incomplete thought. I need to complete the thought by saying I could have scored a 760 on GMAT had this happened, if this happened. So you would expect that there is a condition which is going to come up next. Okay, and focus on this contextualizing skill again. I'm not just reading what I'm reading, I'm also preempting what is probably going to come next. And all of this is natural and logical. It is not forced. Okay, so let's read further. So I'm probably going to hear something which will tell me that why this did not happen. Let's read further. Comma, attracting entrepreneurial efforts on national and international scale. Okay, so the moment I see comma with attracting, I know that this is an ing verbal. Some of you might call it a present participle or whatever. This is an ing verbal which is preceded by a comma, and whenever an ing verbal is preceded by a comma, it modifies the preceding action. It modifies the preceding action. Now, one thing that you need to notice is that I was expecting this part to tell me a condition why the profits were not huge. But this is completely doing something opposite. It is actually a modifier which is modifying something else, and it is not a condition at all. Now, if I use my sentence correction understanding of questions, this is a non-underlined portion. That means this part of the sentence is correct. That means there is no, there can't be a condition which is coming over here. What that means is that this hypothetical mesh part, this could have been, is also incorrect, because this could have been can only exist if there is a condition which tells me had this has happened or if this has happened. But this is a non-underlined portion, so this part is definitely right. So could have been is definitely wrong, and logically also it is wrong. Think of it this way: can something hypothetical, if I use this construction as it is, if I keep this construction as it is, attracting entrepreneurial efforts, what is attracting entrepreneurial efforts? The fact that profits could have been huge, that is the preceding action. The fact that the profits could have been huge, can that attract entrepreneurial efforts? Can a hypothetical thing attract entrepreneurial efforts? No, it can't, right? So what could attract entrepreneurial efforts? What could attract entrepreneurial efforts is the possibility or a certainty of the profits being huge. So probably I'm looking for a choice which will tell me that certainly or with a certain degree of possibility, the profits could be huge, and that thing will attract entrepreneurial efforts. Getting my point? So this is how I read the sentence. This is how I do it. Now I've taken a little longer because I had to explain this guys to you. But when I'm doing it myself, I would probably do it in under 1.5 minutes. And this is a 700 level question, guys, just to give you an idea, because it's hugely underlined. There are a lot of errors which are there. Now, you have seen me solving this question. You have seen me approaching this question. What do you see as the difference between how you approached it and how I approached it? I want you to tell me in the comments over here. And this is very critical, guys. If you don't tell me that, I'll not be able to point out to you whether you have been able to understand basically the entire thing. Okay, so let me know what do you think is the difference in your thought process and in my thought process. So Sujit is saying could have been, please repeat. So Sujit, I'm repeating that, but as I said, this particular question is not important. The more important thing is whether you get the difference in the process. See, could have been is wrong because could have been is a hypothetical scenario. When I say which could have been huge, that's a hypothetical scenario. It means it did not happen. It might have happened, it did not happen. Now, can a hypothetical attract entrepreneurial efforts? It can't. Secondly, if that hypothetical has to be there, there has to be a condition which says why it did not happen. And there is no condition like that. Okay. So Abhi says my method was same. So happy to hear that, Abhi. If you're doing this right, kudos to you. Please make sure that you stick to it the same way. Deepak says grammar versus logic. Valid point, and that's what the difference in my thought process was. The reason I was struggling with that 13 percentile or that inconsistency in my verbal performance was purely because I was focusing on a sentence as a parts of speech. It was like, okay, this is a sentence which is given to me. There are independent clauses over here. There is a modifier. There is a pronoun. There is a noun. There is a verb. There is a whatever, like parallelism. I was like looking at the sentence as parts of speech. That's how I used to approach it. And when I was approaching it like parts of speech, I was not able to look at the bigger picture, which was the logic behind things. And what you need to understand is that GMAT tests you on sentence correction for one main reason. See, you are going to become a manager after doing GMAT. Why is GMAT then testing you on grammar? You're not going to become a language expert or a grammarian. The reason why GMAT expects you to do well on SC is because they want managers, future managers, to communicate in an unambiguous fashion. They want you to communicate using the right meaning. And that's why GMAT SC questions should always focus on meaning. Always focus on the logical part of things. Okay, so that's where the approach is important. Chaitanya says we approached random manner, even though we read entire sentence, we did not break the sentence. And that's what you need to do, Chaitanya. It's very important that you break it. And what you need to understand is that it's not just about breaking it. If you're just breaking it and reading it, it doesn't help. You have to preempt, you have to contextualize. See, I will go to the extent of saying that verbal is actually the easiest section in the entire GMAT. You might laugh at me and say, okay, Piyush, you have now aced verbal. That means you will actually think that verbal is the easiest section. In a part, yes, you can say that. But honestly, the reason I say so is because in verbal, everything that you need to solve the question is right there in the question stem. Obviously, you have to learn some grammar rules, but if you can learn those from a logical standpoint also, that also stays with you in your mind. So in verbal, most of the things are in the question stem. The only thing that you need to do well in order to do well on verbal, in simple terms, is to understand the context. If you can understand the context right, guys, there's nothing else that you need to do in order to ace the GMAT verbal. It's that easy. But most of us don't prepare in such a way that we understand the context, and that's why that's the main problem that exists in why you don't do well on verbal. I hope this gets the point across to you, but just to emphasize on the same thing and helping you understand that contextualization is not only limited to sentence correction or just any part of verbal, it is across all sections of verbal, and that's the biggest problem that most people have. So let's solve an official question now, and I'm going to give you an RC question overall to kind of help you with this, understand this point. So Abhi, my verbal score was a 41 in my very first attempt, and my overall score was a 740. So that was my score. Thank you for asking. I told in the beginning as well, but thank you. Glad that you asked. So official question time. I'm going to give you an RC passage. And in this passage, I've not taken the entire official question. This is sourced from the official material. I've just taken the first para of the question, like RC passage, to keep it short. And there is a question that follows it. I'm giving you a question, but my main intent would be again on the methodology part. So the question which I'm going to give you is limited to the first para, which is there. So this is the first para of the official GMAT RC passage. You just have to focus on reading this passage and solving this question. So I'm going to give you about 4.5 minutes, maximum 5 minutes to do this, and then I'm going to start solving this question with you guys. Okay, so all the best. I'm going to go in the full screen mode, and I'm going to mute myself for the next 4 minutes, 4.5 minutes. Those of you who are watching this in recorded mode, I would recommend you to pause it, solve the question, and then get started. I'll be muted for the next 4 to 5 minutes. All the best, guys. All right, guys. So those of you who have solved the question can start posting your answers in the chat. I'm going to give you another 1 minute before we start with the discussion of this question. I'm going to be on mute for the next 1 minute. All right, guys. So it has been 5 minutes that I've given you this question to solve. So I hope most of you are able to understand the passage. But again, this is again a complicated question, a 700 plus level passage and a question. And I see a lot of responses about B and D. So I think most of you are like debating between B and D. Again, obviously, a lot of people might be biased by the other responses also. But anyway, what is more important than this particular question, as I said, is the method, is the understanding where we get what we get, like how do we actually solve any 700 level RC passage. Basically, that's the main idea. So I'm gonna solve this passage now in front of you basically, and let's focus on the right reading style. So I'm gonna solve it as if I would have done it for the very first time, and this is the passage which I attempted I think for the first time around Jan of 2021, if I remember correctly. And I'm going to probably recall that day and how I actually went about it. And I'm going to share some of the inferences from the same. So let's read this. It is an odd but indisputable fact. So, okay, I see that someone is telling me, the author is telling me that there is an odd fact which is coming, but indisputable at the same time. So he's saying that something is odd about a fact, but it is indisputable. There's no dispute about it. And this is the author's opinion. You need to understand that this is the author's opinion because that's the author's point of view, rather. And that is why, because it is written as it is an odd but indisputable fact. So whatever this is, the author agrees with that. What is the fact? I don't know. Let's read further. That the 17th century English women, okay, it's a fact about 17th century English women who are generally regarded as among the forerunners of modern feminism. So this fact is about 17th century English women who are generally regarded as forerunners of modern feminism are almost all identified with the royalist side. Okay, so this is the indisputable and odd fact that almost all English women are identified with the royalist side in the conflict between royalists and parliamentarians known as English civil wars. So there's a conflict between two parties, and all the modern foreigners of modern feminism are on one side. Okay, so that is what is weird, that is what is odd, but it is indisputable. The author is not having any disputes on that. He says there's no dispute about this. Let's read further. Since royalist ideology is often associated, okay, so the moment I see since, I know there is a time and it is related to time or cause and effect, one of the two. But if I read further, since royalist ideology is often associated, I get to know that this is a cause and effect which I'm talking about. And when I see the word often, I know that this is not necessarily the author's opinion. This could be a third party opinion because the author is saying often associated. That means it is generally associated by other people. Often associated with radical patriarchalism of 17th century political theorist Robert Filmer. So he's saying that this is a cause. This entire part is a cause, that since the ideology is associated with radical patriarchalism of a particular political theorist, there should be the effect which is coming. But I see a hyphenated portion over here. Probably this is explaining something. A patriarchalism that equates. So this is trying to explain this radical patriarchalism. Okay, so let's read that information. But we know that this is the cause and the effect is going to come after the hyphenated portion. A patriarchalism that equates family and kingdom. Okay, so that equates family with kingdom and asserts the divinely ordained absolute power of the king. Okay, so it asserts the power of the king and by analogy of the male head of the household. Okay, so since kingdom is ruled by the king, it asserts the power of the king, and by analogy, it says that the family should also be ruled by the male head. So that was the patriarchalism of Robert Filmer. And this is what royalist ideology is often associated with. That's what he's saying. But let's again leave this definition of patriarchalism aside for a moment and come back to our cause. So what was our cause? Since this is associated with radical patriarchalism, historians have been understandably puzzled, and you need to focus on this word understandably puzzled. This is something which is the author's opinion again, author's point of view again. Okay, and these are like small unique things that you need to focus on. These gives us hints that okay, what is the author really trying to say? So his main focus in the sentence is basically to point out that it is understandably puzzling. Historians have been understandably puzzled by the fact that royalist women wrote the earliest extended criticisms of the absolute subordination of women in marriage and the earliest systematic assertions of women rational and moral equality with men. So he's saying that since royalist ideology is supposed to be, is often associated with this radical patriarchalism, it is actually puzzling. It is actually puzzling. He's trying to highlight this, that it is puzzling that why do royalist women end up becoming the biggest criticizers. So he's trying to highlight something. He's trying to highlight that there is a difference in opinion in the royalist ideology and the ideology of the royalist women. That's what he's trying to do through the sentence. Let's read further. Some historians have questioned, okay, some historians, again, this is not the author's opinion, this is still now, again, a third party opinion that we need to understand. Some historians have questioned the facile equation. Okay, I don't know what is the meaning of the word facile, I don't mind that, but what he's trying to say is that some historians have questioned the equation of equating of royalist ideology with Filmarian patriarchalism. This one that we said, royalist ideology with Filmarian patriarchalism. So he's saying that some people have questioned this. Because again, the entire basis was that it is based on this. And indeed, and again, indeed is a strong word. He's probably going to agree with this. There may have been no consistent difference between royalists and parliamentarians on issues of family organization and women political rights. So he's saying that it's possible that actually royalist ideology is not based on feminine patriarchalism because there is no consistent differences between these two sides when it comes to family organization. But the moment you see but, you see that you know that this is again a twist in the thought, and this is the author's opinion again. But in that case, one would expect early feminists to be equally divided between the two sides. So in that case, they should have been equally divided. But since they're not equally divided, the author is probably trying to say through this that there is some relation between the royalist ideology and Filmarian patriarchalism. That's what he's trying to communicate. So through this entire para, what the author has primarily done is that he has talked about an odd fact, and he has presented a paradox that since royalist ideology itself is supposed to be or is around the radical patriarchalism, it is puzzling to see why the royalist women were the biggest criticizers of the subordination of women in marriage. That's what he's trying to do. Now, with that thought process in place, if I look at the questions then, if I look at the question, it says the author of the passage refers to Robert Filmer primarily in order to. What was his reason for actually referring to the political theorist Robert Filmer? And if you focus again on the words understandably puzzled and the second line, you will get the idea that he was trying to mention, he mentioned this to help us understand that there is a difference in thought process which is like between the royalist ideology and the royalist women. That difference in thought process is what he wants to highlight, that this is something that he wants to highlight. If you look at the option choices, option A, show that royalist ideology was somewhat more radical than historians appear to realize. That's not the objective. It's not debating whether it is more radical or less radical. B, qualify the claim that patriarchalism formed the royalist ideology. Now, what does qualify the claim means? Qualify means adding certain conditions, that in some conditions it is true, in some conditions it is not. That is what what the author is trying to do. He's not trying to qualify the claim that the royalist ideology was based on patriarchalism. He just points that out as a part of the passage. Question the view that most early feminists were associated with royalist faction. Not really true, because it is clearly mentioned that this is undisputable. Highlight an apparent tension between the ideas of royalists and the ideas of early feminists. Yes, that is exactly why he actually did that. Argue that royalists had conflicting opinion on issues of family organization. He's not arguing about that. He's not talking about royalists having conflicting opinions. So if you again look at the approach, if you again look at the process of contextualizing the information The reason I gave you this passage is to understand that even for the very complex passages, you can actually get it right with 100% confidence if you understand the question stem, or not the question stem, the passage really well. You have to break and read. So the main idea, the main problem why most people basically do not actually get the questions right in verbal, the main problem is that most of the methods that we follow focus on one core principle, that is to actually solve the question faster. We always look for shortcuts. That's the main thing that we focus on. And I have a comment from Gaijin. He says, in my opinion, we would not have so much time to operate on the RC in the actual exam. It was good to understand the whole passage, idea of the passage as dissected it, but is there a quicker way? Alak also says, sir, it's time taking. I knew that is going to come up, guys. And that's why the next slide is going to actually handle your answer. And this is exactly what I did, guys, by the way, when I solved this question for the very first time. And I was able to solve this question on an average in 2 minutes, 2.25 minutes basically per question, the entire passage. Okay, the entire passage I was able to do in 2.25 minutes per question. And that's a good enough time for a 700 level question, guys. And I'll show you why. And understand it, guys. This is the main problem. If you are still focusing on solving quickly, that's where the problem lies. You need to go beyond solving quickly. You need to start focusing more on your accuracy. And trust me, guys, focusing on accuracy does not mean that you have to compromise on timing. That's never the issue. That's never the issue. Okay? Please focus on that. Okay, Felix says, since we need an average of 6 minutes for each of the 4 passages, what can we do to ace the passages? So Felix, very valid point, but you don't need 6 minutes for each of the passages, trust me, guys. You have to, we can actually do easier passages in 6 minutes, and for the harder passages, you might need 8 or 9 minutes. And that is what is always true. And I'm going to give you a link for the timing strategy for GMAT. I conduct a webinar on that, and that's very, very important for you to watch. Most people think that they have to solve all questions in equal time. That's not the right thing. In fact, you can do well on GMAT by even not being able to do the last 3-4 questions completely. You can just guess the last 3-4 questions and score up to a verbal 44 if you get the other questions right. Again, I'm not digressing. Coming back to this, the main problem, if you guys understand, is the same thought that many of you are having right now, is I have to solve quickly, and for that I need to look at better methods. These methods which Piyush, you're telling me are good, but it won't work on GMAT. Trust me, guys, that's the simultaneous irony. Most people, what they do is they will read the questions really fast in the first read. They read the questions really fast in the first read. And thanks, guys, for joining, jumping in. Yes, you do solve SC questions in less time. I have a slide on time-taking strategies, just a little bit during this session, towards the end of the session. But in case you want to watch the entire webinar on the test taking strategy part, please check out this link. You can bookmark this link for later as well. Okay, so what people do is generally they will read the quick passage too quickly in the first read. Maybe by spending 2-3 minutes, they will be able to read the entire passage. Now, what happens when you read the passage too quickly? You end up having only a rough idea of what's mentioned. That's what you do, right? You get only a rough idea of what's mentioned. And when you have a rough idea of what's mentioned, you need to reread the questions or the passage again and again when you move to the choices. Am I right in saying that or not? How many of you had to reread the passage or certain choices when you were solving this question yourself? How many of you had to do that? Think about it and tell me. It's a very common issue. Now, when that happens, you end up spending 2 minutes per question unnecessarily. And the problem is not just that you're spending 2 minutes per question doing it back and forth. The problem is you are low on confidence when you're marking the answer. You're still not sure whether I've got it right or not. And that is something which will affect you in the next question also. That carryover effect will be there. You will not be able to actually be concentrated to the test. You'll still be thinking about the previous question. And trust me, how many you have that feeling. Tell me how many of you have that feeling. When you're moving on to the next question, you're still thinking about the previous one. And if you do the maths over here, if you do the calculations, you will see that for this passage, you'll end up taking 9 to 11 minutes. It will take that much time. You're still taking more than 2 minutes, but still not getting the outcome. Now, what about me? When I was solving this passage for the very first time, I read the passage properly. And I remember I timed myself for this. I was able to read for the first para, it took me 3 minutes. For the next para, it took me 1.5 minutes. Why did it take me less time for the next para? Because the next para was A, easier to read. It was not that complex. B, I had a very sound understanding of the context. So I knew what is going to come next. I was able to preempt a lot. So that helped me. So I was able to read this entire para in 4.5 minutes, basically. And Gazin is saying, isn't that true for inference questions? We need to read it. Sorry if my questions are rude. No, Gazin, there's no rude question. See, you don't have to reread necessarily for all inference questions. If you have read the passage and understood the main idea of the author, trust me, you won't have to reread to understand or identify the answer. You might have to reread a small part to confirm the answer. That is always right. But if you're rereading for understanding and spotting the answer, you'll always be low on confidence. There's a huge difference between the two things. I also reread sometimes. Maybe about 30% of the hard questions, I might have to reread a few parts. But for that, I do it for only confirming the answer. Okay, please understand that. So I took 4.5 minutes for the entire para. The good thing was I was having a crystal clear understanding of the entire passage because of that. And then I was able to eliminate the choices confidently. In fact, I clearly remember that I only took 45 to 60 seconds on an average per question. So for the entire passage, where there were like 4 questions, I was able to solve it in about 8 minutes, which is exactly 2 minutes per question. And I was able to get 100% accuracy. I got every single question right. And all these questions are 700 plus level questions, and they are gold. If you can get the 700 level questions right in 2 minutes, that's the best thing you can do. In fact, similar thing happened with me on the test day when I was taking the GMAT, actual GMAT I'm talking about. I remember there was a tough RC passage which came in. I gave about 9 good minutes for the entire passage, 4 questions. I got all those 4 questions right. And it rewarded me like anything. Okay, I hope this part is clear to all of you guys. So the main issue is the time-saving irony that most people have. Sorry for that, guys. So the main issue is the time-saving irony. We focus on shortcuts and we don't focus on learning the core methods. And that's where the problem in verbal lies. Then again, I've taken 50 minutes in this entire session to bring across this point, but I'm going to focus on it now. What is the outcome of this? Since you focus on shortcuts all the time, the thing what happens is you equate verbal with English. You think GMAT SC is all grammar, reading comprehension is all reading. And in fact, when I started my sentence correction preparation, I remember I bought Wren and Martin. Many people bought By Manhattan. I bought Wren and Martin to learn grammar because I thought that's grammar, right? You have to learn grammar. And I learned so many concepts. I remember adverbs of place, time, quantity, simple, complex sentences, whatever. I learned rules. I learned exceptions to rules. I memorized those exceptions. And then there were exceptions to the exceptions as well. So I spent a lot of time. After 2 months, I knew thousands of rules. I memorized a lot, but it was very difficult for me to remember most of them. I used to remember only a few. And my score was still inconsistent. And every time I used to score poorly, I used to look at the answer and I thought, okay, this time I missed this rule. So next time I've got to be more careful with the rule. And in fact, this is the common thing which happened. I went through every concept. I was doing well individually when I was solving questions on subject verb tenses or modifiers or pronouns right after learning the concept. But the moment I used to go to a 700 level question, my score plummeted. At that point of time, I was not able to understand why this was happening. Now, when I look back, I realize why that was happening. The reason why this was happening was when I was doing individual topic by stress, I knew that I'm looking for this kind of error. So my focus was on that part of the sentence. So the main problem was not my understanding of rules. The main problem was not that. My main problem was my identification, my skill of identifying what needs to be applied. So the main problem was not with rules. The main problem was with my process. And where I was focusing on in sentence correction was again and again revisiting grammar rules, again and again doing more questions without working on my process. So if you continue doing that, guys, imagine you will never be able to actually improve your skills because you're actually not tackled the core problem. You're focusing more on the side issues. Okay. And that's why I say you have to have a common learning method of application. For example, let's take an example from quant. Okay. Now, how do we approach quant? And tell me how many of you are scoring above a quant 45 right now? Tell me in the chat, guys, how many of you are scoring above quant 45 right now? And you're actually struggling with verbal. Let me know that in the chat. Let's see how many of you are there like that. How many of you are scoring more than quant 45 and struggling in verbal? Alak says, okay, true patterns. I think you're agreeing with the sentence correction part. But how many of you are scoring more than quant 45, guys? Let me see from you. Okay. I'm scoring 30 is what Alok says. In quant, you mean Alok? I'm talking about quant, guys. Quant 45. Okay. Alok says +1. Chaitanya says +1. So I think you guys are talking about quant 45. Okay. What about others? Just two people with a quant 45 or more? And trust me, guys, if you are okay, Subham says I'm getting quant 50, 51. That's good to know. Me, Akash says, I'm getting 43 to 45. Chaitanya says, okay, guys, if you are getting a quant 45 or more, you are a logical person, and by no means your verbal score should be less than a verbal 30. If your score is less than a verbal 30 and your quant score is a more than 45, that means there is a huge gap in the way you are preparing for quant and verbal. You are not treating both of them equally. You are treating quant differently than verbal. In true sense, in GMAT, you should treat both of them equally. And if you approach GMAT verbal just like you approach quant, trust me, your score will be completely different. Akash, if you're scoring a quant 49, you should definitely be scoring a verbal 35 plus minimum. It should not be a 28. That means it is different. And why is it different? Let's understand that. When we learn quant, and I'm just focusing on this for you to understand where we go wrong when it comes to the prep. When we learn quant, what we do is we first learn concepts, right? For example, let's say you have to solve two equations. We know that for solving two variables, we need two equations minimum. We know this concept, right? At the same time, we learn that, however, if you have an additional constraint, sometimes it is possible to actually score, to actually solve using one variable as well. Okay, one equation as well, sorry, not variable. If you have an additional constraint which is given, sometimes you can solve for the variables using just one equation instead of two equations. This is a concept which we know. But we don't just stop at that. After learning a concept, we also learn a method. We learn a certain method. For example, if I ask you guys to solve this particular question, I'm going to give you just 1 minute to do this because we are actually running slightly behind the schedule. I tried to change a lot of things with this presentation today. So I'll try to speed up the discussion. So I'm giving you just 1 minute to solve this question, and then we are going to solve it together. I'm going to bring across a very, very critical point for verbal. Okay, so do solve this question. I'm going to mute myself for a minute. So I've given 1 minute plus for this question. Again, this question can be easily solved in a minute. That's why I've given just a 1 minute to get this done. But again, the idea is not for you to solve this question, but the idea is for you to get acquainted at least with what is there in the question step. So I'm going to solve this question now for you, and let's understand the difference basically in the approach that we have for quant as well as verbal. So let's read this question. If x and y are positive integers, so I know that x and y are both basically greater than 0, and they're positive, they're integers basically, right? That's what we know. So they can be like 1, 2, 3, and so on, whatever. And I know that 5x plus 3y is basically 76. This is single equation which is given to me. Many people might think that, okay, just based on one equation, we cannot find how many values of x are possible. But since there's a constraint which is given to us that x and y are positive integers, we might as well be able to do that. So what we do is we know this as a concept, then we learn a method. Step 1. And I'm just telling you the method. I'm not teaching you the method. I'm not going into the rationale of the method because that's not the scope for the discussion. Today is a verbal session. I'm just taking this up to help you understand a very, very important point. Okay. So for step 1 is you find one set of values basically that justify the equation, that satisfy the equation rather. Okay. And then step 2 is you find all other values. That's all you have to do. Now, many people might not know this method. If you don't know this method, you might as well probably try with a hit and trial method. That let's put x equal to 1, then let's see x equal to 2, let's see which values work. You can do it that way. but that won't help you to get to the outcome in the fastest possible manner. That's a haphazard way of solving the question. Okay, so this is one method which is a proper method. The method 2 is number plugging. Okay, number plugging is another method. You can plug numbers and you can try and solve the question. So let's try with method number 1, and I'll talk about method number 2 a little bit later on. So what I will do is, as step 1, I'm going to try and find one set of values that basically satisfies this equation. So I know that this is a multiple of 3 because y is an integer. So this also has to be a multiple of 3. So what I will try to do is, I will try to write it like this. I'll try to write it like this, which becomes 78 minus 6x. This is always a multiple of 3 because 78 is a multiple of 3. 6x is a multiple of 3. And then I get x minus 2. So I know that x minus 2 also has to be a multiple of 3. Now, if x is equal to 2, I can easily get x minus 2 as a multiple of 3. So one set of value that will satisfy this equation is when x is equal to 2. And if x is equal to 2, y is equal to 22. So x equal to 2, y equal to 22 will satisfy this equation. And this is step 1 done for me. Now step 2 starts over here. Step 2 is for me to change these values by the coefficient of the other variable. So all I have to do now is change 2 by 3, increase 2 by 3, which becomes 5. So change this by 3. And the moment I'm increasing this by 3, I have to change this value by the coefficient of x. And I have to decrease this by the coefficient of x, and it becomes 17. So if you put 5 and 17 in this equation, it will still satisfy this equation. You can try it out yourself. And I can continue doing this. I can do again plus 3, it becomes 8. I can subtract 5 from this, it becomes 12. Similarly, 11 and 7 and 14 and 2 will also satisfy this equation. You can try doing this. Okay, this is step 2. And this entire thing will take me just 45 seconds to answer the question. This is the method that I use, and there's a logic behind that method. I'm not explaining the logic intentionally. As I said, this is not a quant session. Any one of you has doubt about how to solve this question, you can write to us on support@gmatwiz.com. We'll be happy to help you with that. But the main idea over here is, what I want you to understand is, I can solve this question in the shortest possible time by not using a shortcut. I'm not doing number plugging. I'm using a proper method. If I know this method, I can solve this question in the shortest possible time and I can get this right. And that's what we do for all quant-related things. You learn a concept, you learn a method, and then you go to practicing questions. That's how you navigate. So concept building plus application or the process, then you practice. In verbal, on the other hand, if you look at my approach, what I did for sentence correction was just learning concepts and practicing questions. There was no consistent methodology that I was learning for solving SC questions, and that's why I was struggling with SC. And that's why most of the people that we have worked with, those who have improved their scores, that's the main reason why most people were struggling before, and then they were able to improve because they changed their methods. So what is the right learning curve? What is the solution then? We've talked a lot about the problem. What is the solution? The problem is not being used to the right method. So the solution is to have the right method as the main learning process from the get-go. So when you are learning sentence correction, don't try to learn these concepts individually. Try to learn them from using a common thread, which is basically meaning. Understand, guys, every grammar rule that is tested on GMAT is tested because of that logical aspect. As I said earlier, you are going to become a manager, you have to communicate a logical meaning. So every rule has a logic to it. Every rule has a meaning to it. So don't just memorize that, okay, a past participle does this. No, don't just memorize like that. Understand why it does that. The logic is the common thread that binds them all. So when you have to learn SC, you have to first focus on learning the meaning, how to tackle the meaning, how to understand the meaning of a sentence. And that's why when it comes to studying verbal in SC, what we recommend is always focus on the meaning-based approach. What you see right now is a screenshot of the GMAT-Viz coursework, and that's where you start. So if you're a GMAT-Viz student, this is what we recommend you to start from. So we give you 8 hours, approximately 8 hours of exercises, learning modules, just to help you understand how to identify the intended meaning of a sentence, irrespective of any grammar rule. Don't worry about any grammar rule, just plain and simple. How do you understand the intended meaning by using the context? How do you basically understand that? Okay, and then we move to the second stage, that once you understand the intended meaning of a sentence, then let's focus on the next part where we try to learn each grammar rule that is there from a meaning perspective. Now, why this is important? The reason why this two-step process is important is because when you learn how to identify the meaning of any sentence, the same skill which I taught you, I showed you when I was solving that SC question, the breaking, the reading part, the contextualizing bit. When you learn that, and then you learn each grammar rule from a meaning perspective, then the moment you start thinking about the meaning, the errors will naturally flow to you. The errors will naturally flow to you, guys. That's the best part. You saw that I was not thinking about individual grammar rules when I was solving. I did not have to concentrate on specific rules, because the moment I was able to think about the meaning, the errors were naturally occurring. And that's why it is important. So this is the right method to approach sentence correction. Okay. Similarly, when I talk about RC, when I was learning RC, I remember my early days, I focused a lot on various type of questions. In my very first class, my tutor told me that there are questions on main point, inference, detail, and what these questions test you on. And then I was given to solve passages. I was given some passages to solve. I used to focus on solving those study material questions. I used to read newspapers every day for half an hour, and even started reading novels and working on my vocab. I was doing a lot of hard work, and my focus was on improving my reading speed. How many of you over here are focusing on improving your reading speed just because you're not an average reader? You're not someone who reads a lot. I never completed an entire book in my life ever before preparing for GMAT. I don't like reading. I hate reading to that extent, I can say. So I was not a very good reader. I could not read very fast. That was a big problem with me. And I started focusing on reading speed, because that's what my tutors told me, that you have to read fast in order to understand things fast. And you have to, then only you'll be able to do well on the test. And by doing that, in that entire process, what happened with me was, when I was not scoring well, I actually focused on skimming through the passage, fast reading. I focused on doing more and more passages. I thought the more passages I do, the better I will get. But none of this was helping me improve my score, because the main problem, and the main problem which happened because of all these approaches that I was using, skimming through the passage, was that I was confused about the meaning always. I needed to refer back to the passage again and again. And the worst part, even after doing all this effort, the confidence was low. See, guys, the biggest problem which someone who is weak at verbal faces is not just that they are not getting the score. The worst part is, even after doing everything, even after putting in 2 times the effort that you're putting in quant, you're not getting the outcome. That is what kills you. That is what kills you. That makes you feel that verbal is your nemesis. I used to feel that. I used to feel that no one can beat me in quant, but verbal is something I can't do well on. I can't do well on. That was my thought process. That was actually killing me more than anything else. And the moment I took this as a challenge, that okay, if you really think that quant is something that you are really, really good at, no one can beat you at it, then why don't you take up the challenge and improve your verbal? And I started looking back at the mistakes I was making, and I was able to understand every single reason why I was not able to improve my verbal was because I was not focusing on the right thing. In fact, in GMAT RC, 85% questions are testing you on inference. And in reality, when I was actually preparing, I was focusing on the reading speed. Rather, I should have focused on the comprehension speed. And trust me, guys, when I improved my verbal, my reading speed actually reduced. I am a slow reader nowadays. I read slowly. But the good thing is, I don't need to read twice. I comprehend things so well that in just one read, I'm able to comprehend everything. So, even though my reading speed is low, even though my reading speed has reduced, my comprehension speed has increased. Not just increased, it has increased significantly. And that's what matters. Understand it, guys. That's what matters. Just give me 1 second, guys. Just 1 second. Okay. So I hope you are still able to hear me. Again, having a bit of cough, so having a tough time, but I'll try my best to give my to be the most energetic in the session. So basically, the idea is to improve your comprehension skills. That is the main thing. So that is what you need to do. So in order to develop that, you have to actually go through a proper process. See, the biggest mistake was that when I was initially starting with my preparation for RC, no one actually taught me how to read. Everyone taught me, okay, read fast, do this, a criticized word means this in the main point questions. This is what how you take notes. This is how you skim through the passage. But no one taught me how to read, and that's where the problem was. In order to understand how to read, and in order to do well on RC, you have to understand how to read, and it's a process. It takes time. It takes a lot of effort. You have to be cautious of a lot of things. You need to understand where to pause. You need to take care of complex words. Don't be bogged down by it. If you come across a complex word, I see a lot of people telling me that, okay, for GMAT RC, you need a good vocab. You don't need a good vocab. Trust me. If there is a complex word and you need to know the meaning of it, GMAT will provide you enough context to get the meaning. I showed you that passage, if you remember. There was one word, facile, for which I don't know the meaning till date. Doesn't matter, because it was not important. If it was important, GMAT will give us the word meaning in that sentence. What GMAT expects is that you should have the idea of basic commonly used words. For example, you should understand what does diligent mean, basically. That is important. They might expect you to know that. They may not expect you to know the meaning of assiduous. Okay, all those complex words like GRE does. But in GMAT, if you have a complex word, don't get bogged down. Understand how to take care of that. Understand how to differentiate between a fact versus an opinion. If you saw, I was differentiating what is the opinion, which opinion is author's opinion, which opinion is third party opinion. Why is that important? Because this helps you in understanding the intent, guys. This helps you in identifying that. Most of the RC questions are going to ask you, what is the author most likely to agree with? Which of the following can be inferred from the passage? That is what it asks you on, tests you on. So if you do not differentiate between the opinion, if you do not understand the passage, there is no chance that you can get the questions right. Even if you are getting them right, it's purely because of luck, or some days you're getting it from your familiar judgment. So it's very important that you get this right. And I'm happy to hear, Alak, that you're able to understand all this. You cannot get a free 1 month trial. Obviously, you cannot open up the entire GMAT this course for a 1 month period. Then doesn't make sense. But we have given 10% of our course content in the free trial. In case you want to check it out, you can definitely check it out. I'm going to give you the link for the same, basically in a short, right? Those who want to check it out, about 10% of the course content is there in our free trial. So you can definitely check this coursework out. And this will be sufficient for you to get an idea, because it contains all the topics from SCCR, RC in Quant as well. Okay, thank you, Chaitanya, for your feedback. I'm so happy that you're actually enjoying learning through the GMAT coursework. So this is the link for the free trial if any of you is interested in the free trial of GMAT. So same thing which we teach in our coursework for the passages. So first, learn how to read passages. So if you see, we have about again around 8 to 9 hours of coursework, which includes 70% of this is, by the way, solving questions. It's not just videos that you're watching. It is small exercises focused on individual steps. Let's understand how to involve yourself in reading. Let's understand how to take care of transition words and opinions. And then we get to the art of summarizing information provided in the passage. So that's where you need to start with, guys. Don't just jump to solving questions from the get-go. Understand how to read things first, and that's when you get to the next level. Okay. Now, how to master the approach? So you probably by now know that in order to do well on GMAT, in verbal specifically, what you need to do is you need to contextualize the information provided in the best possible way. That's the main skill that you need to learn. You need to have a process-oriented approach, not just a concept-focused approach. But many times I come across people who tell me that, okay, Piyush, you told me I have to follow the meaning-based approach. I have to follow this involved reading approach for RC. I was trying to do it, but I still did not improve my score. And I tell them that one reason why this happens is it is not just enough to know what is the right approach. You have to master the approach. You have to ingrain that thought process in every single question. Enable it yourself to apply it every single question as a second nature. And you can only do that when you do two things. Number one, you force yourself to use that method. You don't go to a different method. You make sure that you stick to that method for every question. Number two, you always analyze the solutions in depth. Because see, just because you want to apply the meaning-based approach doesn't mean that you'll be able to apply it properly. You should not assume that. It's possible that you want to apply it, but you're not able to apply it for whatever reason. So it is important that you validate whether whatever you have understood as the meaning is actually the right meaning, or whatever you understood as a part of the passage, or whatever you did as part of pre-thinking is actually the right pre-thinking. So that's why it is very important that you understand how to visualize the solutions. In most cases, people go wrong with this part. They focus on doing a lot of questions, but they don't realize that you don't learn from the question, you learn from the solution. So don't just analyze the questions that you get wrong. always focus on the like correct questions also. So first thing that you need to do is refer to solutions that follow a consistent method. Don't refer to 10 different type of solutions that once you are referring to a solution in which CR is solved using a different method, and in another question CR is solved using a different method altogether. Try to stick consistent with the methodology, and the method should also be logical. It should not be a shortcut focused method. It should be a logical method, because the thing with a shortcut is that it will only work in certain cases, it will not work in other cases. So it's very important that you stick to a consistent and a logical method. This is the most important thing if you want to, let's say, master the right approach. Second thing, you should verify each solution or question irrespective of whether you get it right. Even if you get the question right, verify with the solution whether your approach matches or not. It is not just enough to get the option right. Check your approach, guys. That's when you improve your scores. And spend 80% of your time doing that. And when you're doing that, note down the variances in your approach from the right approach. And let me show you how to do this. So let's say this is a CR question that you solved. Okay, so this is the CR argument that you solved. Now, what we do in GMAT is we give you solutions for every question in depth, basically. So when you're, let's say, after solving this question, when you're reviewing the solution, you will ask yourself that, okay, when I read the first sentence, when you read the first sentence, what is the meaning that you generated out of it? What was the meaning that you generated? And does this meaning that you generated match with this meaning that you should have generated as the first sentence completely? So this is the solution that we have provided. Where we have shown you what is the meaning of the first sentence. So you should match whether your understanding of the first sentence when you read just the first sentence, not the entire argument, guys. When you read just the first sentence, does that match with the solution or not? Similarly, you will check when you read the second sentence. Did you combine this information with this information? And did you come up with this inference or not? If you did not, and you still got the right answer, you have scope for improvement. Understand that. Please, please, please make sure I'm reiterating that it is very important that you review the solutions just like this. That, okay, for this sentence, what is that I understood? Does it match with the solution? If it does not, that means that you have still missed something. And that is what will help you to improve your score, guys. This is very, very, very critical. Okay. Now, how do you improve your verbal score? So first, let's understand what your verbal score currently means. So if you're scoring verbal 40 or more, and again, like these are some ESR analysis that I have done, and this is going to be a lot more data heavy now. I know we have been into 70 minutes into the session, so this is going to be a little heavy on your mind, but I'm just trying to present basic inferences from the data. So I looked at multiple ESRs, around thousands of ESRs in my entire career. And based on those ESRs, what I've seen is when someone scores a verbal 40 or more, their number of medium hard questions, medium hard is basically 700 plus level question, is generally the number of medium hard questions that they get correct is around 1450 in that range, or more, basically. The more the merrier, obviously. On the other hand, when you get a verbal 36 to 39, number of medium hard questions that you get correct is slightly on the lower side, between 10 to 15. And it reduces as you go down. Now, why this is important? This is important because you need to understand where your current skill level is. So if you look at the students who are scoring verbal 40 plus, that is what most people are aiming for who are attending this session. The main thing that they have is they're consistent even with hard questions. They are able to even get the 700 level questions correct with a high consistency. So on the other hand, people who are in the score range of 36 to 39, they are having a problem of inconsistency in hard questions. They need a little bit of fine-tuning of methods. Their method is not completely wrong. They're getting a good number of hard questions correct, but they're not consistent with those. So for them, they don't need a change in the method. You need a fine-tuning of method. Okay, so I think there was one student, Nikita, who was in the score range. She mentioned around 37. So Nikita, you need to fine-tune the methods a bit. And when I say method, it could be related to SC, CR, or RC. You have to see exactly where the problem is and work on that. But if you're in the mid-30s, you're only getting the hard questions right because of you being lucky. So you are basically getting stuck with two choices. In some cases, you're getting them right, some cases you're not. So there's luck which is working out. In this case, overall of method is needed. Complete overhaul is needed. And in the other case, I'll talk about that. So just summarizing things. So if you're in the score range of 36 to 39, you need to fine-tune the method. You don't need to change your method altogether. Identify where you need to fine-tune and work on those things. You need to have consistency in hard questions, and you have to focus on specific modules. As I said, it is not a problem with all three modules. Specific modules is where you need to work, and I'll give you some case studies also. I'll help you understand how this all pans out. Okay, don't worry about that. I'll show you case studies how people have worked on these things and they have improved their scores in significantly less time. Now, if you are in the verbal 30 to 36 range, you have some concept gaps as well. Now, these concept gaps are low-hanging fruits, and you should work on them right away because that will help you to improve your score faster. For example, if you remember correctly, there was one student who was saying that I am having issues with CR inference and assumption questions specifically. So you need to work on those low-hanging fruits first. And you most likely need a complete overhaul of the methods that you have been using. And trust me, guys, the complete overhaul, when I say it, I know it sounds tiring or tedious, but it is not that tedious. People have done this in 20, 25 days, a month, month and a half. But the more important thing is, if you do this right, you get to hit your target score in the very first attempt. That's the most important thing. And then you need to do focused practice. Some random practice is not going to help you. You have to do focused practice on your weak area specifically. I see people doing thousands and thousands of questions without focusing on their weak area. So it is very important that you do the focused practice. However, people who are scoring in the range of 26 to 30, you might have multiple concept gaps. You have to review all those concept gaps. So it is better to review the entire module of SCCR and RC individually. Focus on overhauling of the methods. And when you're learning things, when you're doing this entire learning process, focus on application focused learning, not just random learning. Practicing questions will not help you unless you tackle the root first. So let's take up some case studies also. But in case you're already scoring 670 or more, you can always get on a one-on-one discussion with me, because when you score 670 or more, it gets a lot more complex as a process. There are chances that you might not be doing the right things. There are chances that you might be doing a few things correctly. So if you connect with me, I can basically help you in understanding exactly where you're basically going wrong with respect to exact pain points that you might have. So I will look at the factors which you see on your screen, the time of label, the methods that you have used, and resources that you have utilized. So in case you're interested in basically connecting with me on a call, you can use this link which I've just shared in the chat to kind of connect with me. Again, you might have to wait for a day or two to get in touch, but just select the slot which is convenient for you, and I will be helping you in understanding how to work on that. Shubham says, I have verbal 36, I lie in both sets. Obviously not, Shubham, but 36 is like the borderline case. It's possible that you are here or there, obviously one of the two. So please feel free to connect with me. I'll help you in understanding where exactly you're going wrong. So let's take a few case in points to understand exactly how people have used this thought process and improved. So first case that I'm taking up is the case of Akshay. This guy actually improved his strategies to improve from a 650 to 730 in just 24 days. And he did it in a very strategic fashion. Let me share that with you. So when he took the first attempt on GMAT, he ordered the ESR, and ESR really helps you a lot. In case any of you is interested in ESR analysis also, you can reach out to us using this link of call and schedule a call with me. I'll be happy with that to help you with that. So this is something which we helped Akshat with. Our mentor Shakib helped him with the ESR analysis, and we pointed out that critical reasoning and RC are two areas where we need to work. And it is not just from this chart, guys. It's not just about this chart. There are a lot of other parameters in his test which we looked at and actually came to that inference. And the second thing that he was facing was poor timing under anxiety. So this was the first attempt. He started off very well in terms of accuracy, but his timing was really, really bad. You can see that in the first part of the quarter of the test itself, he ended up spending 2.5 minutes. That actually rushed him through the entire test, and he ended up messing up the second and the third quarter. So what we recommended was that the first step you need to do is focus on your CR and RC. And when someone is weak in CR and RC both, the main problem that they're facing is inference. They have an understanding, they know how to understand the meaning of each sentence. The main problem that they're having is they're not able to connect the information between multiple sentences, as in one sentence to another. They're not able to link it, and they're not able to understand what is the scope of the discussion and how do you what is out of scope, what is limited in scope. That understanding of that is required. So he worked on these ideas that we shared with him, and in the 650 attempt you can see the ESR again. In the 730 attempt, in 24 days he was able to increase his CR and RC skills significantly, as you can see on your screen. Now, how did he work on CR and RC? As I said, the first thing that we realized was that his problem is not with the concepts, because he has scored around 40-50 percentile in both of them. So obviously the issue majorly lies with the approach part. And the commonality that we saw was, as I said, in the understanding of the inference skills, the idea of the scope and all. So what he did was, in this 24 days, Akshat sat back and actually kind of started focusing on the approach. That's the framework-driven rethinking that we teach in CR. That's what he started focusing on. He started focusing on the methodology for critical reasoning. First of all, because that's where you improve your understanding of inference, and that is something which will automatically help you in RC. And then for every solution, we reviewed the solution in depth for the correct answers as well. And this is exactly what Akshat had mentioned. Anyone of you who wants to check his interview, you can check it out. This is the link which is there to learn from his case in depth. But he looked at the solutions for every single question. In fact, when he was solving the question at that point of time itself, he would actually mention each option choice, why is it incorrect, whether it is out of scope, whether it is distortion, whether it is limited in scope, and so on. So these are different answer choice elimination methods or techniques that we teach at GMAT. He used to write down shorthand in his notebook, why is he eliminating each choice. And for every question, he used to validate whether the incorrect answer that he picked for a certain reason, does that match with the solution or not? Because in the solution, we used to point it out. And that helped him in improving his score. Okay. And trust me, guys, this has been the story consistently with every student. Right method holds the key to improve your verbal score. Not just Akshat, even Rajiv, who actually got to just a 680 after 1.5 years of preparation. This guy prepared for 1.5 years, used EGMAT for more than a year, still was only able to score a verbal 34. He was able to improve to a verbal 41 and he took about 4 to 5 months time, if I remember correctly. It was not a smooth journey. It took him time to get there, but he planned it right. And for someone who took 1.5 years to get to a level of verbal 34, for him, 34 to 41 improvement in 4 to 5 months is a very, very great job. In fact, in 3 months itself, he was able to improve it to a verbal 40. He actually lagged on quant. He did not focus as much on quant. That's why his overall score was not that high. But what Rajiv did was he focused on the methods in depth. I'll come to Rajiv also. Shreyash, again, another guy, improved from a 640 to 760 by working on the methods. So let's take up Rajiv's case. Now, what was peculiar about his case? And I want you guys to focus on this particular part. The first thing that he noticed, and we looked at his ESR in depth. In fact, he had taken 2 attempts on GMAT. By the time he came to GMAT, the highest score was a 680 and the previous one was a 640, which was about, I think, 6-7 months back before the 681. We looked at both the ESRs, and what we saw was he had a very high consistency in all medium questions, whether it is from SC, CR, or RC. But the moment hard questions used to kick in, as in the 700 level questions used to kick in, his accuracy used to drop significantly. And that is something which we got to see from the ESR. So what we understood was that his conceptual knowledge is fine in all 3 areas. We don't have to revise concepts. For example, in case of Akshat, there was a little bit of conceptual improvement which was required. Not a lot, but a little bit of it was required, and he had to focus on CR and RC solely. But in case of Rajiv, we asked him to work on SC, CR, and RC, all 3 areas, not from a concept perspective, but from an application perspective. And what we recommended him was a 2-step approach. Step 1, and please mark this very, very carefully, guys. This is very critical for all of you who want to improve your score. Step 1, we told him that you need to get to a level where you're able to solve any question, whether it is a 700 level question, 750 level question, with 100% confidence within X minutes. The mistake that many people do is, from day 1, they would want to solve a 700 level question within 2 minutes. And they don't focus on the confidence bit. Their focus is on this part, not this part. And that's where the problem is. What we recommended, Rajiv, was that first step is that you get 100% confidence on any question and get it right in X minutes. Now that X minutes can be a maximum of 3.5 minutes, not more than that. Should be 3.5 minutes or less. But even if you're able to get any 700 level question right within 3 minutes or 3.5 minutes, I'm more than happy with you. But the main thing is you need to have 100% confidence about the answer choices. You should not be worried that, okay, the answer is one of these 2 and you are getting it right by luck. Understand that. Sorry for that. Yeah, having a bit of cough from a few days. Okay, so what I was telling was that we told him that 100% confidence is the key. Because if you get to this level, what is the outcome from this? Can any one of you tell me why this is important? Any one of you tell me why this is important, why step 1 is important? Let me hear from you. In the meantime, you type your comments. I'm gonna grab a glass of water. So let me know why you think step 1 is so critical. Any one of you can tell me that. I'm gonna mute myself for 30 seconds. Okay, so I still don't see any comments, guys. Why do you think step 1 is so critical? Why do you focus on 100% confidence and not X minutes? Any thoughts? And guys, I know it has been a monologue. I have not asked you any questions. Let me see if all of you are with me on this or not. I see about 20 plus people live. Just want to ensure that you are getting everything which I am telling you here. Please share your thoughts, guys. Why do you think step 1 is so critical? And anyone who gives me the right answer is gonna get like direct discussion with me and 2 months course access to GMAT is free of charge. Let me see your thoughts. The free access will be given to just one person, by the way. But yeah, let's see. Okay, Shubham says finding and sticking to the right methodology. Sujit says boosting confidence is developed. It develops the habit. Akshay says. Okay. For contextualizing is what Akshay Kumar says. Okay. What about others? Helps identify mistakes quickly is what Varun says. Chaitanya says it helps in learning and applying concepts in a smooth fashion initially while learning. Okay, thank you so much, guys. But I agree with Shubham. Shubham has got it right. The main thing which is important in this is if you are able to do this, and again, it's not easy to do this. You cannot get 100% confidence on every question that you're solving. But if you're able to do this, one thing is for sure that you have found the right method. That is for sure that you know that the method that you're using is exactly the method that it should be. So you know that methodology is in place. There is no problem with that. Now you can start working on the time. That's what matters. So that's why step 1 is very important, because understand it this way, guys. If you don't fix the method first, if you don't fix the method, you don't get the method right, no matter how many questions you practice, your time is not going to come down. Your time is not going to come down. It will only be at the same level, or you're going to basically get let's say inconsistency in your performance the moment you try to bring down the time. But if you get the method right, the moment you do that, you are automatically, the more you practice, the better your timing gets. So first step is to get to this. Step 2 is then to bring this experience down to 1.8 to 2 minutes per question. That you can do by taking sectional tests one step at a time, reducing the time from 3 minutes. Let's say X right now, for example, for you is 3 minutes in, let's say, CR. Then you bring it down gradually to 2.8 minutes, 2.9 minutes, whatever you're comfortable with. Gradually bring it down to 2.8 minutes, then bring it down to 2.7 minutes, 2.5 minutes, whatever you are feeling comfortable with, and do it in that fashion. That is what is important. Okay. How can 100% confidence helps to boost confidence? Say some have answered it and it sounds illogical. Okay, again, I'm not going by what others have mentioned, but yeah, Varun, the main idea is if you have 100% confidence, that means your methodology, you're actually able to identify the right answer using the right method. That's the main idea. Akshay says some tutors suggest reading the first line and the last line of the passages. What's your take on this? Akshay, I know which tutors you're talking about. Some of them are really well funded in the Indian space. But trust me, guys, that doesn't work. I've done that myself. Those are like really good tactics to showcase in a few questions. Students love it when they see, oh, wow, this can work. But trust me, guys, I'm not saying that they don't work for those tutors. They work for those tutors because they have been doing that for so long. And this is something which you can do for quant also yourself in many cases. But what is important over here is that you need to, first of all, understand the context right. If you start doing that, then you will develop, you will actually get to a level where you might be able to do what they're saying. But you cannot start off by doing that. Understand that. You have to first start off by using the right methods. Okay? So that is important. And then he worked on reducing his exam day anxiety through meditation and less number of study hours per day. That is what we recommended also to him, because he was putting in a lot of hours on studies every single day. So we asked him to reduce that. And again, Shreyash improved his score from a 640 to 760 by identifying his weaknesses, working on both quant and verbal together. Again, I'm not discussing Shreyash's case in depth because we have already discussed a lot of use cases. Varun, your answer was right, but Shubham actually came to the right answer first. So I'm gonna give that 2-month free course access to Shubham. So Shubham, you can connect, Shubham Kumar, you can connect with us on support@gmatwiz.com, and we'll be happy to share that with you. And anyone of you who wants to check out Shreyash interview, who scored a 760. By the way, Shreyash is someone who is joining Harvard this year. He's converted Harvard and Wharton, both the schools. So in case you want to check out his story, you can check out using this link. Akshay, how many marks are enough? I took, I think, 3 or 4 marks. That's what I took. I generally recommend between 5 to 8 marks are enough if you're doing the right thing. Okay. So let's focus on the sequence of studying then. So what is the right sequence of studying for verbal? So there are 3 skills that are tested in GMAT verbal. Comprehension skill is what is required for sentence correction. Analytical reasoning and comprehension are both required for CR, and analytical reasoning, comprehension, and focus on main point are all required for RC. So if you are starting your preparation right now, it is better to do SC first, then CR, then RC. But if you're a retaker, if you're already done some bit of prep, then you should take a module-wise test and identify what your strong and weak areas are. So by a module-wise test, I mean about 30 questions for SC, 30 questions for CR, 30 questions for RC, with a fair mix of all topics. If you're a GMAT student, you can do this right away by going to the GMAT platform, by going to the Whiz quiz section, basically. Okay, but don't make sure that you're taking equal spread of all different topics within that module. That is very important. Don't just take a bias test. Okay, so take that, and once you have actually got identified your strong and weak areas, for example, let's say your SC score is 90%, CR is 60, and RC is 40. You know that you need to work on CR and RC first, then SC. And try to maintain this order of SC, then CR, then RC for your weak areas. Okay, understand it this way. This student is better in CR than in RC. But I'm still saying that he should start with SCR because this is the logical sequence of learning. So if 2 areas are in the weak areas, then he should always do CR before RC, irrespective of the scores of CR and RC. Similarly, if someone is weak in SC and RC both, even though he's better at SC than RC, he should do SC before doing RC. Okay, I hope this is fine with you. All of you understand this? You're welcome, Akshay, and happy to know that you're able to understand a few things from this discussion. Now, how to learn the right approach? So to learn the right approach, you need to first understand the method, the various steps involved in it. And then you need to solve 15 questions, taking 1 question at a time. Very important, guys. Let's say, for example, you're learning the meaning-based approach for the first time in sentence correction. You've not applied it ever. You cannot just try and solve like 10 different questions at once and then check the solution of all those questions, because then you will not remember exactly how you where you paused in the first sentence, what did you understand at each pause point, and all of that will not stay fresh in your mind. But if you do 15 questions taking 1 at a time, you will be able to review the solutions clearly. You will be able to avoid the deviations from the method very well, and you will be able to improve your score with more consistency. So that is very, very important, guys. And try to learn from the solution for the first question. See where your deviation from the approach is, and then apply that understanding on the next question. Don't just randomly go to the next question. Try to apply that understanding on the next question and improve further from the next question. That's how you actually learn a lot. And by the time you solve 15 questions 1 at a time, you would have done a very good job at learning the right method. And in order to facilitate all of this, in GMAT, for every topic, we don't just teach you concepts and then give you practice questions. And that's something which most of the people do, by the way. You just have concept files, concept videos, and then just practicing questions. What we do is, in between, we have this application focused file called Concept Booster, in which you get to solve 1 question at a time, which is followed by the solution of the question right away. Then you have second question, followed by the second solution, and so on. So this is something which will help you in understanding the method learning the application, and then you can move to the practicing questions phase where you will be taking more quizzes to increase your score further. Okay. Now, once you have understood how to apply a certain method, it is important that you master the method as well. How do you master it? You need to then basically solve about 4 to 5 sections. Like you, for mastering the method, basically, what you need to do is you need to take about, I would say, 10 questions, sets of 10 questions, basically. Maybe take 4 to 5 sets and try to reduce your timing one by one. And then take 4 to 5 sectional tests to fine tune the weak areas, basically. So what should be your timing strategy for verbal? Again, a lot of you were asking how should I time myself for verbal and other things. So in the test, I recommend that about first quarter, you should be spending about 1 minute 40 seconds on an average per question. In the second quarter, you should be spending about 2 minutes on an average per question. It should not be a linear timing strategy. It is very important for you to understand, because if you're doing well on the test, in the first quarter, you will get mostly easy to medium questions. You will not get medium hard questions. But in the second quarter, the question difficulty will go to medium hard. So that the moment the difficulty level rises, you need to account for more time. And in the third quarter, if you're doing really well, the question difficulty will even go to hard level. So over here, you would require to spend about 2 minutes 20 seconds also on an average. What this means is, in the last quarter, you might be left with 1.5 minutes on an average per question. Many people think, is it the right thing to do? But I feel yes. So when you're left with 1.5 minutes per question, for 8 questions, let's say, don't try to do every question in 1.5 minutes. It's better to do 2.5 minutes, whatever you take, and try to do about 5 or 6 of these questions. Instead of trying to do everything, do 5 or 6 of these questions properly, get those questions right, and last 30 seconds, just mark everything which is remaining. Don't leave questions unattempted ever on GMAT. That is penalized more heavily than getting them wrong. So please make sure that you do that. And the timing for each section should be about 1 minute 30 seconds for SC, about 2 minutes for CR, and RC should be about 1 minute and 50 seconds. And obviously, you have to adjust your timing to by 20 seconds upwards or downwards, because depending on your strong or weak areas. For example, SC was my strength. So in my actual GMAT, I scored, if I remember correctly, 94 percentile in SC. And my average time per question was about 1 minute 15 seconds approximately. So it's below the baseline, because it is my strength. So I should be able to do it faster. On the other hand, CR was one of the weakest area that I had. Again, in all 3 areas, I had 80 percentile or more, but still out of the all of them, CR was the weakest, I would say. So I used to take about 2 minutes, 10 seconds, 15 seconds for CR questions in general. So while practicing, devote right amount of time. Automatically, it should happen for each difficulty level, because the more difficult the questions get, obviously your time is going to be higher for that. Okay, so that brings us to the end of this session. I'm going to open this up for a Q&A now. In case you have any questions, please feel free to ask me. I will be more than happy to help you with your questions and queries. So please feel free to share your thoughts with me. Any questions that you might still have, do let me know. In case you want to check out the free trial of GMAT Whiz, I've shown you the link. It's there in the chat. You can check out the coursework that we have. And I'm going to share the link of, let's say, scheduling a call with me as well, with you again. So in case anyone wants to speak one-on-one with me, you have a more personal question that requires more data points for me to understand, please use this link in the chat, which is given to you, to schedule a call with me. Okay? Any questions that you guys might have related to your preparation, please feel free to ask me. I know I've been speaking continuously for the last, around close to an hour, 2 hours now, but I'll try my best to still help you with your questions. How can I share my ESR for my ESR analysis? So Deepak, you can schedule a call with me using this link and send your ESR over on this WhatsApp number, or you can send it on piyush@gmatwiz.com. Okay. Email is better, because that way I'll be able to sort through and search with your name itself. So you can just schedule a call and send an ESR over to this email ID. I hope that helps. Any other queries, any other questions, guys? More than happy to take them up. And if you really like this session, if you really found this helpful, do give it a thumbs up and do share it with other students who you think are struggling with verbal. I've tried my best to take up the best lessons from my experience of improving my verbal score and helping others. So please feel free to share this with other people that you actually find struggling with verbal. Okay, so okay, Deepak, happy to know that you have already scheduled a time on my calendar. Okay, so I don't see any other questions on the chat right now. So please feel free to send across your questions on the shared details. It was great interacting with all of you. And I wish you all the best for your GMAT preparation. Do stay in touch in case you want any help for your GMAT. We are there to help you at GMAT this team. You'll find our team to be really, really supportive and the course to be really, really personalized. So all the best for your preparation. And it's me signing off for the day. All the best and stay positive. Make sure that you do your best on the GMAT. Thank you so much.